Amy Ayers, Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, and Eliza Thomas were all heartfelt, nature-loving teenagers from Austin, Texas. These wonderful and immeasurable young girls shared an undying friendship and a passion for all living things. But their promising lives were cut short by unsolved murders on the night of December 6, 1991, a tragedy that left the Texas Capitol and the entire state grasping for answers amid a sea of confusing evidence. This is an examination of the 1991 Austin yogurt shop murders and the horrifying tragedy left in the wake of what happened at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop. Welcome to the Cold Case Project. Amy Lee Ayers, the youngest of the four victims. Amy Lee Ayers was born on January 31, 1978. Growing up in Texas ranch country, she quickly became immersed in the ranching culture and the cowgirl lifestyle that the open plains inspire. From a young age, Amy developed an obsession with the outdoors and a special affinity for animals. Her love of nature was evident in her two major hobbies, fishing and horseback riding. By the age of 3, Amy was already competing in horse shows, where she excelled in events across Texas. Her mastery of equestrian skills, including the art of cutting horses, a technique where the rider separates a cow from the herd and keeps it isolated, demonstrated her unique talent. Amy was a natural horse whisperer, a skill that would have undoubtedly led to her dreams of owning horses and becoming a veterinarian. In her adolescent years, Amy continued to pursue her passions. When she wasn't hanging out at the horse barn, she was training her dogs or making friends with strangers' pets. Her ability to connect with animals seemed almost magical, as if her energy drew them to her. She carried this spirit to various activities, including the Burnett Middle School yearbook staff and Lanier High School's Junior Future Farmers of America chapter, where she served as vice president. Amy was also an active participant in the Travis County Livestock Show. Her ambitions were clear. Amy dreamt of tending to animals on open farmland. Tragically, her dreams were never realized, as her life was cut short after a visit to the yogurt shop with her best friend, Sarah Harbison. Sarah Harbison, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, Amy's best friend, was born on October 28, 1976. She was the younger of two daughters of Barbara and her stepfather Frank Harbison. In 1979, the family moved to Austin, and Sarah quickly made the city her home. Like Amy, Sarah developed a love for outdoor activities and sports from a young age. Sarah's competitive spirit shined through in basketball, one of her favorite sports. She loved being part of a team and pushing herself to excel. Her commitment extended to various activities, including cheerleading. Remarkably, she would often play in a basketball game and then switch roles to cheer for the boys' teams right after. Sarah also joined her high school volleyball squad and immersed herself in numerous school organizations. She became a representative on the student council and was a dedicated member of the Lanier FFA chapter, where she took great pride in showing sheep at county fairs alongside her older sister Jennifer. Jennifer Harbison, the eldest child of Barbara Harbison, was born on May 9, 1974. Growing up alongside her sister Sarah, Jennifer shared a close bond with her family. Her mother described Jennifer as mature beyond her years, quick-witted, and socially active. Jennifer had an athletic streak, excelling in track and field. She was a leader in the FFA program, where she served as the local chapter president and district vice president. Her love for animals and agriculture was evident in her involvement with FFA and county fairs. Jennifer was also preparing for a future career in rodeo barrel racing, a natural progression of her skills. Jennifer's maturity allowed her to take on a part-time job at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop to help save money for her dream car, a navy blue Chevy S10 truck her father was helping her purchase. Tragically, this job brought her into harm's way on the night of December 6, 1991. Eliza Thomas, born on May 16, 1974, grew up in Travis County, Texas. Her parents divorced when she was a child, but she remained close to her mother Maria and her younger sister Sonora. Eliza had a passion for country music and dancing. As a teenager, she often attended dance events with her best friend Michelle. Eliza dreamed of becoming a model, inspired by the homemade photo shoots she and Michelle staged before their outings. She collected beauty products and cat figurines, and she used her earnings from selling pigs at county fairs to fund her first modeling portfolio. Eliza worked the night shift at the yogurt shop alongside Jennifer. She loved her job and the independence it gave her, but on that fateful December night, her life was taken too soon. Timeline of events. The night of the murders on Friday, December 6, 1991, Barbara Harbison returned home around 4:30 p.m. to find Sarah sitting on the couch. Sarah informed her mother that she planned to go out that night with Amy and asked if Amy could spend the night at their house. Barbara agreed, and Jennifer offered to drive the girls to the mall before her shift at the yogurt shop. Later that evening, Jennifer clocked in at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop located at 2949 West Anderson Lane. She worked alongside Eliza Thomas, who was also scheduled for the night shift. Sarah and Amy spent the evening at the mall before arriving at the yogurt shop to wait for a ride home. Around 10 p.m., customers reported seeing the four girls in the shop, appearing happy and acting normally. Unfortunately, that would be the last confirmed sighting of the girls alive. Sometime between 11 p.m. and 11:47 p.m., multiple assailants entered the yogurt shop. The perpetrators tied up the girls, sexually assaulted them, and shot them execution-style with .22 caliber bullets. The attackers then stacked the bodies in the shop's storeroom, poured accelerant around the scene, and set the building on fire before escaping into the night. At 11:47 p.m., Austin Police Officer Troy Gay noticed flames coming from the yogurt shop. He reported the fire, and backup arrived at the scene. By midnight, authorities discovered the bodies of Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy. The girls' bodies were severely burned, with some charred beyond recognition. Amy's body was found in a separate part of the store, indicating she may have tried to escape the blaze before being shot again. All four victims were presumed to have died before the fire consumed the shop. In the days following the crime, investigators confirmed there were multiple assailants involved. No signs of forced entry were found, and the materials used to bind the girls were taken from the store itself. The murders shocked the Austin community, leaving grieving families and residents desperate for answers. Without a doubt, the most significant piece of evidence discovered in the yogurt shop murder investigation is the mysterious DNA profile belonging to an unidentified male found on two of the four bodies after DNA technology expanded at the turn of the millennium. While not much is known about the sample outside of the gender of its donor, it's been announced that the profile does not match any of the tested suspects police have compiled since their manhunt began, nor does it match hundreds of associates of the prime suspects listed by the Austin Police Department thus far. Technicians have been ruled out, fellow law enforcement officers have been ruled out, and the first responders have been ruled out. This means the DNA most certainly belongs to one of the men responsible for these harrowing acts of rape and murder. As we await the results of further testing and for a match to be uncovered, another critical aspect of the case is how the authorities' brutal mishandling of suspects early on and the deception of the police may have derailed the entire investigation through their despicable use of coercion and eliciting false confessions. Had Detective Hector Polanco not intimidated Maurice Pierce into claiming his .22 caliber gun was the one used in the homicides by his friend Forrest Wellborn, investigators would never have followed up on this false lead and would never have arrested two innocent men along with their supposed cohorts, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. Instead, they could have focused their time, money, and energies on finding a viable suspect. Police and prosecutors alike knew the four men had no physical connection to the yogurt shop and were aware that Pierce's gun wasn't the murder weapon. To cover up their ineptitude, they turned to the bad cop routine. It is a tale we have seen far too often. Imagine being an underage boy brought in by police officers for a crime you didn't commit, cornered in a windowless, low-lit room by men twice your size, demanding you say what they want to hear. They bullied these boys into false confessions by feeding them details of the crime and creating narratives that the boys eventually repeated under duress. The officers used each man's false confession against the others, tricking them into believing that their friends had already confessed, making it seem futile to deny the charges. This manipulation took precious years away from a proper investigation into finding the real killers. The Austin Police Department and Travis County Prosecutor's Office must take the blame for this catastrophic failure. Their rush to create answers where there were none cost the victims' families the justice they deserved. It is inexcusable and disgusting behavior, yet vital to understand to grasp the entire picture of the failed and fractured yogurt shop case files. The coerced confessions didn't stop with the 4 main suspects. Over 50 false confessions related to the case were received, including one from the infamous serial killer Kenneth Allen McDuff. McDuff claimed responsibility for the murders on the day of his execution, leading police to investigate whether he had been in the Austin area at the time of the massacre. While it was confirmed that he had murdered another woman, Colleen Reed, in Austin around that time, his claims about the yogurt shop murders were eventually dismissed as false. This disturbing trend of false confessions further clouded an already muddled case, distracting investigators from uncovering the real culprits. The most prominent theories surrounding the case have included potential involvement from other serial killers. Paul Dennis Reed, known as the fast food killer, was often mentioned due to his similar modus operandi of binding victims and shooting them execution style in fast food restaurants. Reed, however, was ruled out as a suspect because his DNA did not match the profile found at the crime scene. Additionally, Reed operated alone and had a history of mental disabilities, which went against the crime scene evidence indicating multiple skilled offenders. Similarly, the Lane Bryant shootings in Illinois in 2008, which involved the execution of female victims in a store's backroom, were compared to the yogurt shop murders. However, the surviving victim from the Lane Bryant case confirmed that the gunman acted alone, making any connection to the yogurt shop case highly improbable. Of all the theories proposed by the community, one stands out. The idea that 2 unidentified men seen in the yogurt shop on the night of the murders might be the culprits. Multiple witnesses reported seeing these 2 men sitting at a booth after 10 p.m., acting strangely and emitting a peculiar aura. One of the most compelling testimonies came from Daryl Croft, a former police officer and security manager who visited the yogurt shop with friends around 10 p.m. on December 6, 1991. Croft described how a man in a green military fatigue jacket loitered near the line, asking customers to go ahead of him so that he would be last. When he approached Croft, the man asked if he was a former cop and requested to cut in line, which Croft found suspicious. Croft then observed the man order a soft drink and slip into the back of the store after being given permission by Eliza Thomas, who was working the register. Croft grew increasingly uneasy and waited around the front counter for several minutes to see if the man would return, but when he didn't, Croft left the store. He later reported the incident to the police, but no sketch of the man was ever created. Another customer reported seeing the same 2 men sitting at a booth near closing time, giving off an unsettling vibe. The woman noted that as Jennifer Harbison locked the doors and flipped the sign to indicate the store was closed, the 2 men remained seated, appearing as if they weren't going to leave anytime soon. The witness was struck by how normal the girls inside the store acted compared to the odd behavior of the 2 men. Despite these disturbing observations, the 2 men have never been identified or cleared by authorities. Police have stated that they would like to speak to them as witnesses, not suspects, but their peculiar actions on the night of the murders have led many to suspect they could be involved. In one of the crime scene photographs, taken the morning after the murders, a napkin with a scribbled message was found on a table. The message read, "I was here," with what appeared to be a doodle or signature. While its significance remains unclear, some believe it could have been left by one of the killers as a chilling calling card. It's details like these that continue to haunt those who follow the case. Decades later, the Austin yogurt shop murders remain unsolved, leaving families and a community desperate for answers and justice. The case stands as a painful reminder of the consequences of investigative failures, false confessions, and the devastating impact of unsolved crimes on victims' loved ones and society at large. Kristen Galvin was last seen at her grandmother's home in Spring, Texas, on January 2, 2020, and has not been heard from since. Her disappearance was not her first encounter with danger. Just a few weeks earlier, she had fallen victim to a harrowing trafficking ordeal. Kristen had previously run away from home with a man she believed to be her boyfriend, Arian Jackson, a Houston-based rapper known by his stage name, Young Corleone. Unbeknownst to Kristen, Jackson was not a romantic partner, but rather a pimp involved in sex trafficking. He had lured numerous women and girls, including Kristen, into his trafficking ring, where they were held captive in a house on Bissonnette Street in Houston, a notorious hub for prostitution. His victims were forced to endure horrific conditions, including beatings, drugging, and threats of violence, all while being required to earn $1,000 a day through sex work. Some of the victims were as young as 14 years old. Kristen, still a minor herself, was caught in this nightmare. Fortunately, Kristen was rescued a week and a half after her initial disappearance and was returned to her parents in spring. However, the damage had already been done. She returned home deeply traumatized, haunted by the threats made against her and her family by her traffickers. She revealed to her family that the traffickers had warned her that if she failed to comply with their demands, they would harm her loved ones. The experience left her mentally scarred and emotionally fragile. Her parents, unable to afford specialized residential treatment for trafficking victims, sought to help her through therapy and psychiatric care. Despite their best efforts, Kristen struggled to cope with her trauma. She had constant nightmares, lived in fear for her life, and was burdened by the trauma she had endured during her captivity. Tragically, just 2.5 weeks after her rescue, Kristen vanished again. This time, she left behind no clues, and her family was left devastated, fearing she had once again fallen into the hands of traffickers. Jackson, the man responsible for her first trafficking experience, denied having any knowledge of her whereabouts or what might have happened to her. However, investigators soon found disturbing signs that Kristen had indeed been trafficked a second time. Witnesses reported seeing her photo on websites notorious for advertising sexual services. These reports suggested she might be frequenting the Bissonnette area of Houston once again, or could have been taken out of state, possibly to Atlanta, Georgia. In fact, in March 2021, a prostitution advertisement featuring Kristen's image reportedly appeared online in the Atlanta area, further fueling fears that she was being exploited in the sex trade. Jackson remains a central figure in the investigation. In February 2023, Jackson was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to sex trafficking minors with force, fraud, or coercion. At his sentencing, Jackson tearfully recounted a troubled upbringing, stating that his own mother had been involved in the sex trade and that he had never had a fair chance in life. Despite his claims of remorse, prosecutors argued that Jackson had continued his trafficking activities even after his arrest. They presented evidence showing that he had used smuggled cell phones to continue managing and exploiting victims from inside jail. His manipulative and predatory behavior made him a dangerous figure who preyed on vulnerable girls like Kristen. Before her descent into the world of trafficking, Kristen had been a bright and promising student. She was actively involved in her school's junior ROTC program and was a member of the drill team. Her teachers and peers remembered her as a kind, driven young girl with a bright future ahead of her. However, her life took a tragic turn when she became entangled with Jackson and his trafficking ring. Despite the passage of time and the efforts of law enforcement, Kristen's whereabouts remain unknown. The last confirmed sighting of Angelica Gandara was in her hometown of Temple, Texas, on the evening of July 14, 1985, between 5 o'clock and 5:30 p.m. A witness saw her inside a 1977 Chevrolet pickup truck, accompanied by an unidentified Caucasian male and female. The truck, described as being in disrepair, had a red and white hood, front fender, and bed, with blue and white doors and a white top. Angelica was seen about 2 blocks from her grandmother's residence in Temple, and she had been walking back to her family's home at the time of her disappearance. She has never been seen again. Angelica had lived in the 800 block of North 6th Street in Temple at the time. A neighbor reported seeing her the day before her disappearance, pushing her niece in a stroller between her grandmother's house and her own home. The neighbor recalled a blue car pulling up next to Angelica as she walked, with the driver attempting to convince her to accept a ride. Angelica, however, refused the offer and continued walking. The car circled the block, slowed down beside her again, and then drove off. Angelica never mentioned the encounter to her family, and the following day, she vanished without a trace. In late July 1985, a clerk at a Shamrock convenience store in San Antonio, about 150 miles south of Temple, reported seeing a girl resembling Angelica on several occasions after her disappearance. According to the clerk, the girl would be dropped off at the store by a man in a car, and she would go inside alone, seeming tense and in a hurry. After learning of Angelica's disappearance, the clerk tried to delay the girl on a subsequent visit by offering her a drink and attempting to call the police. However, the man in the car came inside, grabbed the girl, and ordered the clerk to remain silent. The clerk was unable to provide a description of the man, and this account has not been confirmed. In 2007, authorities announced they considered David Elliott Penton a person of interest in Angelica's case, along with several other young girls who had gone missing or been murdered, including Amber Crum, Era Johnson, and Shannon Sherrill. Penton, who has been incarcerated in an Ohio prison since 1987, is known to have signed a plea agreement admitting to the murders of 3 young girls in Texas, who disappeared over a period of 18 months in the Dallas area. These victims were all between the ages of 4 and 9. Penton had also been convicted of manslaughter in the child abuse death of his own infant son in 1984. While free on bond awaiting an appeal, he fled and remained on the run until 1987, when he was charged with the murder of a friend's 9-year-old niece in Ohio. He was subsequently convicted of that crime. Penton's cellmates later came forward, claiming that he had implicated himself in the disappearances of Era, Amber, and Angelica, but no charges have been filed against him in connection with any of these cases. Another possible suspect in Angelica's disappearance is Ramiro "Ruby" Ibarra, who was convicted in 1997 of the 1987 rape and murder of a 16-year-old girl from Waco, Texas. Ibarra, an acquaintance of the victim's family, broke into her home and murdered her. He was sentenced to death and is still awaiting execution, but authorities have not been able to link him to Angelica's case. Angelica's disappearance remains unsolved, with foul play suspected due to the circumstances surrounding her vanishing. Despite the passage of years and the investigation into potential suspects, Angelica's case has yet to be resolved. Laura Gabber was last seen on December 1, 1997, when her boyfriend, Chris Bigham, claimed she planned to take a trip from their home in Pecos, Texas, to visit a friend in Dallas. According to Bigham, Laura purchased a Greyhound bus ticket for the journey, but she never arrived at her destination and has not been heard from since. However, an employee at the Pecos Greyhound station later told investigators that Laura never bought a ticket there. Her sudden disappearance raised alarm, but the story took a darker turn when Bigham, within days of her vanishing, returned Laura's 2 youngest children to their respective fathers while continuing to care for her 13-year-old daughter. Shortly after Laura went missing, Bigham relocated to Washington, a move that would later raise suspicions. For over a year, Laura's case remained a mystery with little progress until December 1998, when Bigham confessed to killing her, providing chilling details of what he claimed had happened on the day she disappeared. According to his account, Laura had pointed a gun at his back during an argument, and he shot her in what he described as an act of self-defense. Bigham told investigators that after shooting Laura, he initially buried her body somewhere near Pecos, but later exhumed her remains, burned them inside a barrel, and disposed of the container by submerging it in the Pecos River, specifically beneath a bridge on Farm Road 3398. He provided a detailed description of the barrel, claiming it had a 3-inch hole near the bottom to allow oxygen and fuel to circulate inside, and he mentioned a pipe that was placed inside the container. In August 1998, divers searching the Pecos River discovered a barrel matching Bigham's description in the area where he claimed to have dumped it. Forensic analysis of the barrel revealed traces of human remains, specifically material that was later identified as fragments of human toes. This discovery, combined with Bigham's confession, provided the evidence authorities needed to officially charge him with Laura's murder. Further testimony came from Laura's teenage daughter, who told police that Bigham had given her a different story, saying Laura had committed suicide and that he had only disposed of her body to protect the family. The daughter alleged that she had even seen her mother's remains inside the barrel before Bigham burned them. Despite Bigham's claims of self-defense and the conflicting accounts he provided to both police and Laura's daughter, the evidence was overwhelming. In 1999, Chris Bigham was convicted of Laura's murder and sentenced to prison. Laura had worked as a dancer in various Texas clubs before her disappearance and had been living with Bigham in a mobile home on a 20-acre property he had purchased near the Pecos River just a few months prior to her death. Although her body has never been recovered, investigators believe the evidence found at the scene, combined with Bigham's confession and the forensic analysis of the barrel, confirms that Laura met a violent end. Abigail Estrada was last seen leaving her home in Harlingen, Texas, on June 16, 2007, under circumstances that would ultimately lead to a tragic and unresolved mystery. That day, Abigail left the house with her 16-year-old boyfriend, Ruben Torres Jr., and was never seen or heard from again. At the time, Ruben claimed he had dropped Abigail off at a street corner near her home, but his story raised more questions than answers, and suspicions quickly began to mount. Abigail's disappearance was troubling from the start. Her loved ones immediately expressed doubt that she had run away, noting that she left behind all her personal belongings, including extra clothing, something she would have taken had she planned to leave for an extended period. They also pointed out that she was wearing slippers when she left the house, which didn't align with her usual behavior if she was going out for any significant length of time. Her parents, who were aware of Abigail's relationship with Ruben, had consented to it, as had Ruben's parents. The couple's relationship wasn't a secret, and there had been no indication that Abigail intended to leave her family behind. The investigation took a dramatic turn in August 2007 when Ruben Torres was charged with capital murder in connection to Abigail's disappearance. The arrest came after he appeared in court on unrelated charges that had been filed before Abigail went missing. Authorities revealed that Abigail had been a witness in a juvenile felony case against Ruben, a detail that immediately cast doubt on his earlier claims about what happened the day she disappeared. The timing of her disappearance and her involvement as a witness in a criminal case suggested a possible motive, but despite these troubling connections, prosecutors faced significant challenges in building a case against Ruben. Several months after the initial capital murder charge was filed, it was dropped due to a lack of evidence. With no body and limited forensic proof, authorities struggled to make their case stick. Ruben remained behind bars, serving time for other unrelated crimes, but Abigail's case grew cold. In March 2009, Ruben Torres was released from custody after completing his sentence for the unrelated charges. For years, Abigail's family continued to push for answers, refusing to give up hope that justice would be served. Their persistence paid off in August 2015, when Ruben was charged with Abigail's murder for a second time. By this point, new evidence and witness statements had come to light, strengthening the prosecution's case. Torres, now an adult, was formally charged with capital murder, and his trial began in January 2017. During the trial, one of Ruben's friends took the stand and delivered chilling testimony. The friend claimed that Ruben had confessed to killing Abigail because she had reported his involvement in a drive-by shooting to the police. According to the testimony, Ruben viewed Abigail as a liability and decided to silence her permanently. The testimony painted a grim picture of what may have happened to Abigail on the day she vanished. Faced with mounting evidence and witness statements, Ruben's defense crumbled. After just one day of testimony, Ruben Torres pleaded guilty to capital murder. His guilty plea spared him from the possibility of receiving a harsher sentence, such as life in prison or the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Given the time he had already served while awaiting trial, combined with the possibility of early release for good behavior, it's possible that Ruben could be freed after serving as little as 10 years. For Abigail's family, this outcome was a devastating blow. Although they had finally received confirmation that Ruben was responsible for Abigail's death, the lack of a harsher sentence left them feeling that justice had not been fully served. More importantly, Abigail's body has never been found, leaving her family without the closure they so desperately seek. The exact circumstances of Abigail's death remain a mystery. Ruben Torres has never disclosed the location of her body, and despite extensive searches and investigations, there has been no trace of her since the day she disappeared. Authorities believe that foul play is unquestionably involved, given the details of the case, Rubin's confession, and the evidence presented at trial. Abigail Estrada's case remains open. Glenda Fichtner was last seen in the early morning hours of September 28, 2007, leaving her job at the General Motors assembly plant in Arlington, Texas. She was expected to return home to her apartment in Fort Worth, Texas, but she never made it there, and she has never been heard from again. Concerned when they couldn't reach her for several days, Glenda's loved ones began to worry something was terribly wrong. On October 1st, her daughter went to check on her at her second-floor apartment at Hidden Valley Estates, near the Woodhaven Country Club. The apartment was empty, and there was no sign of Glenda. Her daughter immediately called the police, who arrived to investigate. They found disturbing clues suggesting foul play. Glenda's vehicle, a gold or champagne-colored 1998 Mazda Millennium with Texas license plate number L69SJL, was missing. Inside her apartment, authorities noticed several items were missing as well, including a comforter, pillows, a trash can, a vacuum cleaner, and a sewing machine. The apartment appeared chillingly clean, wiped of fingerprints, and it looked as though someone had meticulously scrubbed the space in an attempt to remove evidence. Despite the cleaning efforts, investigators found blood evidence in the apartment and, more tellingly, discovered blood-stained towels, paper, a bath rug, cleaning supplies, duct tape, and some of Glenda's clothing in a nearby dumpster. The presence of these items, along with a bleach stain on the floor and marks on the carpet from recent vacuuming, pointed to a violent struggle having taken place inside Glenda's home, followed by a hasty cleanup attempt. The search for Glenda intensified after the discovery of these disturbing signs. Several days after she was reported missing, police located her car abandoned at an old and used car wash on Hatcher Road in Dallas. The vehicle had been torched and its license plate removed, seemingly in an effort to prevent identification. The condition of the car deepened investigators' fears that Glenda had met with foul play, and their suspicions were confirmed when they began to focus on a man with a criminal past who lived nearby. In November 2007, police arrested Rodney Eugene Owens, a former neighbor of Glenda's, on unrelated charges. During their investigation, they uncovered evidence, including fingerprints and DNA, that tied Owens to Glenda's disappearance. Authorities believe Owens attacked Glenda as she entered or was about to enter her apartment on the night she vanished. Owens was subsequently charged with Glenda's murder, and his trial began less than a year later in October 2008. Despite the seriousness of the charge and the weight of the evidence against him, Owens's defense team offered little in his defense, calling no witnesses to testify on his behalf. The trial lasted just 2 days before the jury found him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison for Glenda's murder. In 2010, Owens was sentenced to an additional 99 years in prison for an unrelated assault charge, and he must serve both sentences consecutively. Under the terms of his sentence, he will not be eligible for parole for at least 60 years. The news of Owens's conviction brought some closure to Glenda's grieving family, but the pain of her loss remains. Glenda had been a longtime resident of Hidden Valley Estates, having lived in the same apartment since 1987. She had worked at the General Motors plant for 17 years, where she was known as a dedicated employee. Her daughters described her as a loving mother who maintained daily contact with her family. She was not known to have any enemies and wasn't involved in any romantic relationships at the time of her disappearance. Her sudden, brutal death shocked those who knew her, and the details of the case continue to haunt the community. Despite Owens's conviction, Glenda's body has never been found, leaving her family to carry on without the closure of a proper burial. Authorities believe Glenda fell victim to a random, opportunistic act of violence by a man with a history of criminal behavior, including carjacking, burglary, and aggravated assault. Though Owens will likely never be free again, the exact details of what happened to Glenda on that fateful night remain a chilling mystery. Judy Marie Foster was last seen in Grand Saline, Texas, in the early morning hours of September 8, 1990. That night, she had been at a local shopping center on East Highway 80, a popular gathering spot known as the Bear Grounds, where she was seen sitting on the tailgate of a pickup truck with 3 young men. Witnesses recalled that Judy appeared intoxicated, and at one point, she fell from the truck, hitting her head on the pavement. Some accounts say she used a red shop rag to wipe the blood from her injury, while others claim she took off her shirt to clean the wound. Despite her head injury, Judy continued her night with the group, getting into the truck with 2 of the men while the third remained passed out in the truck bed. The driver later told police that after dropping one of the passengers off at a friend's house, Judy, and the unconscious man drove to City Lake, a well-known local hangout. The driver claimed he returned Judy to the Bear Grounds by 6 a.m. and dropped her off near her maroon Ford Thunderbird, but no one else saw her return. 4 days later, on September 12th, Judy's 12-year-old daughter, unable to locate her mother, confided in a school nurse who called the police. That same day, an employee at the Bear Grounds reported that Judy's Thunderbird had been parked in the lot for several days. The car was locked, the windows were rolled up, and there were no signs of foul play. But inside, police found Judy's wallet, identification, keys, and an empty cigarette case. Judy's family insisted it was unlike her to leave her daughter without arranging care, and her disappearance raised immediate suspicions. 2 of the men who had been with Judy that night were quickly ruled out as suspects, but the driver of the truck, the man who claimed to have dropped Judy off at 6 a.m., became the prime suspect. His name has never been publicly released, but police quickly became suspicious of his actions and behavior. When questioned, he immediately asked for a lawyer and refused to answer any more questions. Witnesses also reported seeing him at the Triple B truck stop near his home at around 5 a.m. On the morning Judy vanished, his clothes appeared to be blood-stained, his shirt was torn, and his jeans looked as though they had been cut. The truck stop clerk said he stayed for about an hour and noted that someone was slumped against the passenger door of his truck. Despite these troubling details, police lacked the evidence to make an arrest, and the suspect has never been publicly named. At the time of her disappearance, Judy was going through a difficult period. She was an unemployed truck driver and was emotionally distraught over a pending divorce. She had recently returned to Grand Saline to get away from her estranged husband and to start over. Although she had stayed out late before, Judy was described as a devoted mother who would never leave her daughter without ensuring she was taken care of. Her loved ones knew immediately that something terrible had happened. Despite the passage of time, Judy's case remains unsolved, and authorities suspect foul play. Some believe that Judy may have died as a result of her head injury that night, and her death was covered up by those who were with her. Others fear a more sinister fate. The driver of the truck remains the prime suspect, but without new evidence, the mystery endures. Questions linger about what really happened at City Lake, who the second person seen in the truck at the Triple B truck stop was, and why the suspect refused to cooperate with police. More than 30 years later, on Monday, December 24, 1974, an event unfolded that would become one of the most haunting mysteries in Fort Worth's history. 3 young girls left their homes for a late Christmas shopping trip, but never returned to their families. This chilling case, now known as the Fort Worth Missing Trio Incident, has perplexed investigators and intrigued mystery enthusiasts for nearly 5 decades. Today, we delve into this enduring enigma, seeking to answer the question that has remained unresolved for 50 years. What most likely happened to the Fort Worth Missing Trio? It is the morning of December 23, 1974, and 17-year-old Mary Rachel Trelica has just received a call from her recently married husband. She learns that her 2-year-old stepson will be spending Christmas at their home. Excited and eager to prepare for the visit, Rachel decides to head out for some last-minute Christmas shopping at the local mall. Needing someone to go shopping with her, she reaches out to her longtime friend, 14-year-old Lisa Renee Wilson. Renee, who was supposed to attend a Christmas party with her new boyfriend by 4 p.m. that day, agreed to go with Rachel as long as they returned well before 4 p.m., so she could have enough time to prepare for the party. Rachel agrees. So Renee decides to go to her boyfriend's place and inform him about the slight change in plans while Rachel gets ready. During the conversation between Renee and her boyfriend Terry, Julie and Mosley, Terry's 9-year-old sister, overhears the conversation and decides she'd like to go shopping as well. She eagerly asks if she can come along, but is told she'll need her mother's permission first. Julie calls her mother, Ray and Mosley, and after some pleading, her mother agrees, on the condition that she must be back home by 6 p.m. Since Renee planned to return before 4 p.m. anyway, Julie had permission to go. So when Rachel arrived around noon to pick up Renee in her husband's car, Julie joined the two, and the trio headed out together. From the Mosley residence, the trio first stopped at a surplus store in Fort Worth, where Renee picked up some layaway items she had waiting. Afterwards, they headed to the Seminary South Shopping Center, where several witnesses saw them entering the mall. When the trio failed to return in time for a Christmas party Renee was supposed to attend with Terry, their families grew concerned. The Mosleys contacted the families of the other girls, and together, they went to the Seminary South Shopping Center to search for them. Arriving around 6 p.m., they scoured the entire mall, but found no trace of the girls. The family searched for the trio throughout the rest of the evening and spent the night at the mall in case the trio returned. The next day, Rachel's husband, Tommy Esel, received a letter that claimed to be from Rachel. The letter read, "I know I'm going to catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears' upper lot. Love, Rachel." Having received this clue, the families headed to the lot where they indeed found the car. Inside it were items purchased from the mall, indicating that the girls had returned to the car earlier that afternoon before their disappearance. Despite the letter, the families remained unconvinced that the girls had truly run away. Several details led them to this conclusion. First, the letter was addressed to Thomas A. Esel instead of the more personal Tommy, which Rachel typically used when referring to her husband. Additionally, Rachel's name on the envelope the letter came in appeared to have been initially misspelled. The L was first written as an E and then corrected to look more like an L. Finally, the postmark on the envelope raised further suspicion. It lacked a city designation and included only a blurred zip code, which appeared to be 76083. Interestingly, the number 3 seemed to be either backward, as if applied with a hand-loaded stamp, or a partially formed 8. Other factors raised even more doubts as well. If Rachel had truly run away, what were the chances that Renee and Lisa would have joined her? Renee had been eagerly anticipating attending the Christmas party with Terry, who had given her a promise ring earlier. It seemed unlikely that she would have left all of that behind, without even a word, especially considering she had informed Terry before leaving for the mall. As for Lisa, a 9-year-old, she would have had little motivation to venture far from home, particularly without her family's knowledge or permission. These considerations made the possibility of the girls running away seem increasingly implausible. All of these factors only deepened the family's doubts about the authenticity of the letter. With still no sign of the girls, they contacted the police. The case was promptly assigned to the Youth Division of the Fort Worth Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau for investigation. In the meantime, the families began distributing missing person flyers throughout the state and reaching out to newspapers across the country. Soon, tips started coming in, and witnesses began stepping forward, but despite these efforts, there was still no breakthrough. With no significant progress from the police investigation and their efforts yielding little, the families decided to hire a private investigator. The investigation continued until 1979, when the private investigator, John Swaim, died from a drug overdose. Before his death, Swaim ordered all files related to the case to be destroyed, leaving the families with even fewer answers and raising more questions about the course of the investigation. Following Swaim's death, the police investigation continued, leading investigators and the families of the victims down many roads and dead ends. Each time, however, the result was the same: no answers, no closure, and no sign of the missing girls. The case remains shrouded in mystery to this day, with every lead eventually fading into uncertainty. Being a case that is nearly 5 decades old, countless theories have emerged about what might have happened to the Fort Worth missing trio. Let's delve into some of the most prominent and debated possibilities. Theory number 1, the runaway theory. This is one of the most popular theories, and it is not hard to see why. Rachel's husband received a letter that claimed just that. But seeing the issues with this theory, which have already been mentioned, this is probably the least likely reason for the disappearance. Theory number 2, the sister did it before Rachel and Tommy got married. Tommy had been in a relationship with Rachel's sister, Deborah. This history has led some to speculate that Deborah may have been involved in the trio's disappearance. Supporters of this theory point to several details as clues to this being the case. The night before the disappearance, Deborah had been staying with Rachel and Tommy, and the three spent the evening drinking and playing games late into the night. When Rachel received the call about her stepson visiting for Christmas, she initially planned to go shopping with Deborah. However, Deborah claimed she was too exhausted from the previous night and needed to rest. This decision not only left Rachel to go shopping with Renee and Julie instead, but it also meant that Deborah knew Rachel's plans and had ample time to orchestrate an ambush if she was so inclined. These circumstances have fueled ongoing speculation about Deborah's potential involvement. Just like the runaway theory, however, there are notable flaws in this theory. First, witnesses reported seeing the Fort Worth trio at the mall on the day of their disappearance, but no one claimed to have seen Deborah at the scene before the families arrived. This absence of eyewitness accounts linking Deborah to the location weakens the case against her. Additionally, there's the matter of the letter. If Deborah had been capable of orchestrating such a complex plan to make her sister and the two other girls disappear while effectively covering her tracks, it seems unlikely that she would have made such an obvious misstep with the letter, such as using Tommy's legal name instead of the more informal option and the misspelling of Rachel's name. Theory number 3, a random kidnapping during Swaim's investigation. He uncovered a series of unusual calls made in the area around Rachel's home. Digging deeper, he discovered that a 28-year-old man who worked at a store where Rachel had once applied for a job had been using his position to obtain the personal information of young women, including their references from job applications. Alarmingly, this man also lived in the same neighborhood as Rachel, raising the possibility that he had been stalking some of these women, possibly including Rachel, both over the phone and in person. And with all three of the victims being female, this seemed to make sense. Upon further investigation, however, it was discovered that the suspect had moved out of the neighborhood a while before Rachel married, and with little proof that he actually physically stalked Rachel, or even called her for that matter, the lead wasn't pursued much further. Theory number 4, an organized crime. Several details from the investigation suggest that the trio may have been abducted by an organized group. One intriguing account came from a witness who claimed to be an acquaintance of Rachel. He reported seeing the trio at the mall and even briefly speaking with Rachel. According to his statement, the girls were accompanied by another individual. However, he did not mention noticing anything that indicated they were being held against their will. 50 years later, this case remains unsolved. What's your thoughts on what happened to the Fort Worth trio? Tammy Esel was last seen in Houston, Texas, on December 19, 2006, in a case that would span more than a decade, filled with disturbing revelations and a tragic end. At the time of her disappearance, Tammy was working as an exotic dancer, a job through which she met William Joseph Greer. The two began an affair, and Tammy ultimately left her husband to be with Greer. The couple started living together, but their relationship would soon turn dark. On the morning of December 19th, Tammy vanished without a trace, and what followed were chilling accounts that pointed to a gruesome crime and a man desperate to cover his tracks. Just a few days after Tammy's disappearance, on December 22nd, Greer was arrested in Cleveland, Texas, under bizarre circumstances. He was found wandering naked, intoxicated, and disoriented in a field. When questioned by authorities, Greer made a shocking admission. He claimed he had been using cocaine and had accidentally shot and killed Tammy. Despite this alarming confession, the authorities dismissed his story as incoherent ramblings of a man under the influence. He was released from jail the next day, and what happened next would send investigators on a chase that would last more than a decade. Upon his release, Greer went to visit a relative in Houston, where he made a startling statement. He told the relative that he had messed up his life and that he was planning to leave Texas for good. He said he was heading to Georgia to see his brother and that he had no intentions of ever returning. True to his word, Greer traveled to Georgia, where he spent the Christmas holidays with his brother. During this visit, Greer confessed once again. He told his brother that he had accidentally shot and killed Tammy, then buried her body. He also shared his plans to flee the country, telling his brother that he was going to Canada to start a new life. The last time his brother saw him was at a truck stop in Georgia, where Greer disappeared into the night. While Greer was on the run, disturbing new details about Tammy's disappearance began to emerge. On December 30th, Greer's two young sons, who were 9 and 13 years old at the time, made a shocking revelation to the police. They told investigators that they had been home on the night of December 19th and heard their father and Tammy arguing in the early morning hours, between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock a.m. The boys said that during the argument, they heard a gunshot, followed by a gurgling noise. They then heard their father ask Tammy if she was dead or alive. This harrowing account painted a grim picture of what may have happened in the family's home that night. Later that morning, after the gunshot, Greer's sons left for school as usual. When they returned home that afternoon, Tammy was nowhere to be found. Their mother, Greer's ex-wife, picked them up later that day to take them for the holidays. The boys didn't speak of what they had heard that night until December 30th, after the holidays had ended and they were supposed to return to their father's house. It was only then that they told someone what had happened, prompting a police search of the family's residence on Barmby Drive. The search turned up chilling evidence of a violent crime. Investigators found blood in the bedroom, enough to indicate that someone had suffered a serious injury or been killed. They also discovered a roll of clear plastic wrap, leading police to believe that Greer had wrapped Tammy's body in the plastic before disposing of it. Based on the evidence and the children's statements, authorities theorized that Greer had taken Tammy's body to a remote area, possibly in Cleveland, Texas, and disposed of it. In January 2007, Greer was indicted for Tammy Esquivel's murder, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. However, Greer had already disappeared, vanishing without a trace. Years passed with no sign of him, and it seemed as though he had successfully evaded capture. But in November 2017, nearly 11 years after Tammy's disappearance, Greer was finally located and arrested in Nacajuca, a remote town in southern Mexico near the Guatemalan border. His long run from justice had come to an end. Following his arrest, Greer struck a plea deal with prosecutors, agreeing to plead guilty to second-degree manslaughter in Tammy's case. The plea deal brought some measure of justice, but it left many questions unanswered. Greer never revealed the exact location of Tammy's body, and despite extensive searches, her remains have never been found. The circumstances surrounding Tammy's disappearance strongly suggest foul play, and it is widely believed that Greer murdered her and disposed of her body in a place that remains undiscovered to this day. Tammy Esquivel's case remains open. Lisa Eubanks was a high school senior living with her mother and stepfather in Texarkana, Texas, when she vanished under mysterious circumstances on January 15, 1999. She received a phone call from a male friend around 12:30 a.m., and an unidentified person arrived to pick her up about an hour later. Lisa left her house, stepping into the unknown vehicle, and she was never seen or heard from again. Her disappearance left her family and investigators with more questions than answers. Lisa's family didn't find it unusual that she left the house late at night, without saying where she was going. She had the freedom to come and go as she pleased, and they assumed she'd return shortly. But the fact that she carried her house key when she left indicates she expected to come back. Her parents later stated that it was completely out of character for Lisa to leave for an extended period of time without contacting anyone. Adding to the mystery was the fact that Lisa left behind all of her belongings, clothing, purse, makeup, curling iron, at the family home. There were no signs she had packed or planned a long absence. Her mother noted that Lisa had been acting normally before she disappeared, with no indication that she was troubled or planning to run away. Lisa had just transferred to a new school, the Bowie County School of Success, the day before she disappeared. Her mother said the transfer was Lisa's decision. She had been having minor issues with some students and teachers at Liberty Ilo High School, and she believed the move would allow her to graduate early. Despite the change, Lisa was a strong student who maintained above-average grades and had a good relationship with her parents. Her mother described Lisa as independent-minded, noting that most of her friends were older. Lisa had been enrolled in the Distributive Education Cooperative of America program, which helps students balance school and work. She had already gained work experience in various fast food jobs and appeared motivated to start building her life. Despite all signs pointing to a stable and well-adjusted teenager, Lisa's disappearance was initially treated as a possible runaway case by law enforcement. However, those who knew her were skeptical that she would leave without a trace, especially without taking any of her belongings. Her mother was adamant that her daughter would never have left for this long without letting someone know where she was. Complicating the investigation was the lack of clear leads about the person who picked Lisa up that night. The driver's identity has never been confirmed, and there are few details about where Lisa was going or who she planned to meet. There were no obvious signs of trouble in Lisa's life, and she had not expressed any desire to run away. Despite the passage of time, the case remains unsolved. Lisa's family continues to hold out hope for answers. Her disappearance has left a lasting impact on her loved ones, who continue to search for any information that could shed light on what happened to her that night. The circumstances surrounding Lisa Eubanks' disappearance remain perplexing, and authorities have not ruled out foul play. It's possible that she initially left with someone she trusted, only for things to take a tragic turn. Whether Lisa left willingly or not, her family and friends remain haunted by her sudden disappearance and the lack of resolution. More than 2 decades later, Lisa's case continues to be classified as a missing person or runaway, but the question remains, did Lisa Eubanks run away from her life, or did she unknowingly walk into danger that night? Martha Dunn was last seen in Dangerfield, Texas, on September 5, 1990, after a tense return home that would ultimately mark the beginning of a decades-long mystery. Just the day before, her parents had brought her back from visiting relatives in Oklahoma so she could start the new school year. However, the homecoming was far from joyful. Martha, who was unhappy about returning to Texas, got into an argument with her parents upon her arrival. The tension lingered throughout the next day, and by 2:20 p.m. on September 5th, her parents saw her for the last time. Later that evening, around 10 p.m., Martha spoke on the phone with her boyfriend, 17-year-old Eric Owens. By the following day, both Martha and Eric had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a tangled web of questions that remain unanswered to this day. In the immediate aftermath of their disappearance, theories began to circulate about where the young couple might have gone. One of the most prominent theories suggested that Martha and Eric had traveled to Hayworth, Oklahoma, where Eric's aunt lived. Several people reported sightings of the pair in that area, giving hope that they might be found soon. However, these sightings were never confirmed. Another theory proposed that the couple might have headed to Kansas, specifically the Wichita area, where Eric's mother lived. Again, despite the plausibility of this lead, it ultimately led nowhere. The trail seemed to go cold until September 30th, nearly a month after their disappearance, when Martha's father received a phone call that reignited hope. A friend of his who lived in Durant, Oklahoma, claimed to have seen both Martha and Eric. According to the friend, they appeared to be dirty and hungry, and he took pity on them, cleaning them up and giving them food before they disappeared again. Law enforcement rushed to Durant to investigate this sighting, but by the time they arrived, Martha and Eric were nowhere to be found. As the search dragged on, troubling details about the couple's lifestyle began to emerge. Both Martha and Eric were known to be heavily involved with drugs at the time of their disappearance, raising the possibility that their vanishing act was connected to their drug use. This theory suggests that they may have become entangled in dangerous situations due to their drug-related activities, possibly owing money to someone or falling in with the wrong crowd. However, despite the concerning circumstances, police have found no direct evidence to suggest foul play in their disappearances. Investigators have maintained that it's most likely Martha and Eric left voluntarily, though their exact motivations remain unclear. Over the years, tips and leads have surfaced sporadically, but none have led to their recovery or provided concrete answers about what became of them after that September night. In the decades since Martha and Eric went missing, both families have been left in a state of limbo, waiting for a resolution that has never come. Despite extensive searches and investigations by both the Morris County Sheriff's Office in Texas and the Augusta Department of Public Safety in Kansas, the mystery persists. The lack of evidence pointing to a definitive conclusion has left authorities and loved ones grappling with the possibility that Martha and Eric could be out there somewhere, living off the grid, or that something more sinister may have happened to them. As time goes on, the urgency to solve the case remains. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Morris County Sheriff's Office at 903-645-2232 or the Augusta Department of Public Safety at 316-775-4500. Both cases remain officially unsolved. Maria Elizalde disappeared from Dallas, Texas, on November 25, 2015, under circumstances that continue to haunt her family. It was the night before Thanksgiving, and the household was bustling with preparations for the holiday meal. Amid the excitement, Maria and her two sisters asked if they could go outside and play with the neighborhood children. With permission granted, the three girls left the house sometime between 7:30 and 8 p.m. That evening, Maria's stepfather looked outside and saw all three girls playing in the yard at around 9 p.m., a reassuring sight for the family as the night carried on. However, just minutes later, their world would be turned upside down. When Maria's mother, Kathleen Rodriguez, called out for the girls to come back inside, two of them immediately returned, but Maria did not. The 15-year-old never came home that night, and despite efforts to locate her, she has never been seen or heard from again. Maria's early life was marked by instability. Although born in the United States, she spent most of her childhood in Mexico. When she was still a baby, her paternal grandmother took her to Mexico, effectively cutting off her mother's contact for several years. Kathleen Rodriguez wasn't able to see her daughter during that time, and it wasn't until about a year before Maria's disappearance that she finally returned to live with her mother in Texas. This reunion came after disturbing allegations of abuse at the hands of a relative in Mexico, and there were signs that Maria carried emotional scars from her tumultuous upbringing. Her mother noted that Maria occasionally acted out, which may have been linked to her past trauma, but she never showed any signs of being a habitual runaway. On one occasion, she ran away from home but returned after only a few hours. Given this history, it was unusual and alarming when Maria vanished without a trace on that November night. Adding to the concern is the fact that Maria had no money, no coat, and likely no plan to leave for any extended period. Her mother described her as a very naive and trusting young girl, someone who would not easily recognize danger or the potential for harm. These traits raise fears that Maria may have fallen victim to someone who took advantage of her vulnerability. Although there have been scattered reports suggesting that she may still be in the Dallas area or in nearby communities such as Balch Springs or Cedar Hill, none of these sightings have been confirmed. The authorities initially classified Maria as a runaway, but her mother strongly believes that Maria may be in danger and that there is more to her disappearance than meets the eye. Nearly a decade has passed since that fateful night, and Maria's whereabouts remain a mystery. Her case remains unsolved.